Hey everyone, welcome to What Are the Odds? Joining me, unfortunately, Raphael Esparza couldn't be here, but I think we've done better. We've done better than Raphael here. We've got Nolan Patrick of Strike Point Sports, who's going to help us break down the College Football National Championship game and the NFL Divisional Round games. We'll get to that in 1 minute, but first I want to mention, down in the description, be sure to click on that free 60 link that will take you to docsports.com, the mothership, where you can use that $60 credit free towards any handicapper, any package on any sport that you want. So, for instance, this weekend, if you go to Doc Sports and you check out the big play alert, you'll see a lot of top games. We have, I think, 3 different game of the years going in the NFL this weekend. Well, those top plays are $30 a piece. So that $60 credit, you can get 2 free big plays from any one of the 13 handicappers at Doc Sports. So, all right, Nolan, I got to tell you, this might be one of my favorite weekends of the football season in general. I love the divisional round, okay? Just the best of the best teams are left, and the fact that we have this college football playoff championship on Monday is just the cherry on top of the sundae. However, you and I were talking before the show, just generally speaking, don't really love the card this weekend, right? Like, not a ton of value out there, kind of tough to parse through and find that one big spot where you're like, yep, this is it. This is where I'm pushing my chips in. Kind of talk to me a little bit generally about what was going through your mind and what you were thinking this week in the lead up to our Thursday football release.
Yeah, like we said, I really agree. I don't see, a ton of value. There are some spots that I do like and I'm going to attack, but I think a lot of times you see the public, this is such a big football weekend. They want to wager on every single game, every single total. They want action in all of the games throughout the entire weekend. And I don't think that that's a profitable thing to do. I think the books are almost baiting you in with some of these lines because there's not a lot of games, so they can focus specifically on these smaller matchups and really put lines out that are going to make the average better think. So I think one thing that people really want to focus on is find that 1 or 2 spots that they really like and attack those instead of just throwing money at every one of these games.
Yeah, I see that Fast Eddie 69 is in the chat. Welcome, Fast Eddie. You were asking Eagles over the Rams with that 6-point spread. We will get to that game shortly as we break down all 4 of the divisional round games and the college football playoffs. But just to go back to something that you said, I really want to reiterate that because I actually put a note on my football picks that I released to my clients this week at the very top that, hey, some of you might be surprised that I don't have a big play again this week. But I don't see a big play. I'm not the type of handicapper that wants to pump out something big just to have something big, all right? And I know that maybe that can be frustrating for clients because, like you said, people want to bet these games. But that's not what I do. That's not how I approach this, right? And you and I are very similar in this vein. We're having winning football seasons. That's important to us. We're all about long-term profit. We're all about value. And if I see a game in a number in the divisional round that I wouldn't bet in week 6, I'm not going to bet it just because it's a divisional round. Right. I'm like this in all sports. I know it frustrates some of my clients sometimes. Like, I don't release plays in the World Series. I don't release plays in the NBA Finals, the Final Four. When it gets deeper, the deeper you go into any given sports season, I feel like the less the value is. Do you agree with that?
I couldn't agree more. I agree 100%. I think the less games that are there, the better Vegas is, and the more that they can suck the average bettor into those games because they just want to bet so bad. I want to bet everything I have on the Super Bowl. Well, Vegas wants you to do that sort of thing. So you're going to find value when there's more games, when there's a bigger picture.
I agree. It's funny though, but it's weird. Like, Arun, Shiva, and I are such opposites pretty much in everything in life and in handicapping. But he's the 1 play a day guy in every sport. I play volume. But one thing I noticed, he's the one handicapper that I've ever seen that actually does better when there's fewer games on the board. There's just like 1 game on the board in these playoff scenarios. Somehow, freakishly, that's how he does his best. But all right, you guys came here to listen to us break down some games. In honor of another famous Nolan, Christopher Nolan, and his outstanding work, Memento, we're going to start at the end with the college football playoffs. Then we are going to backtrack to the NFL game. So Monday night's big game, Ohio State and Notre Dame. Let me just take a minute. Everybody's been doing it the last couple of weeks. Got to laugh at the SEC for not being here. Get out of here, losers. Beat it, Johnson. But were you surprised looking at this number? Ohio State opened as a 9.5-point favorite. It has been bet down to 8. Were you surprised that the number opened that high in this game?
I think I was. And I think, obviously we're going to get into it a little bit more. I think, in my opinion, Notre Dame proved that they deserve to be there. Ohio State over the last, month and a half, 2 months, has proven that they're probably the hottest team in college football. They're playing as good or better than anybody in college football. And, defensively, offensively, they're so efficient on both sides of the ball. But this is a really, really big number. I was surprised. I thought it would be right around a touchdown, just a little bit higher. I believe Ohio State closed at -5.5 over Texas. I thought it would have been a little bit higher just because they won by those 2 touchdowns, even though it wasn't a 2-touchdown game. But I think when they won 28-14, I thought that would bump the line up a little higher. I thought we'd be looking at 6.5 and 7, 9.5. And there were a couple books that opened at 10. I was really surprised.
Okay, how much of this now? Raphael and I have been talking about this for the last couple of months with Notre Dame. They are having one of the best betting seasons in college football history. Okay, they're 13-2 against the spread. They have covered the spread 11 straight weeks. The last time that they didn't beat a closing line was September 21st against Miami of Ohio. They're 13-2 against the spread. The only 2 teams that they didn't cover against this year were the 2 teams from the MAC.
Yeah.
So they have just been cashing ticket after ticket after ticket. And I do feel like Notre Dame deserves a little extra credit for that because they are such a public team, right? Mm-hmm. Like their numbers are inflated because the books know that the public wants to bet on these guys every week anyway. They're taking a lot of square money. So the fact that they are on an 11-0 against the spread run is frankly phenomenal. So in this line movement, how much of that do you attribute to just the fact that guys have been cashing tickets on this team for the last couple of months and they're just going to ride that horse till she bucks you? Or how much of it do you think is actually looking at the matchups and people determining that, you know what, we think this is going to be a little bit closer of a game?
I definitely think it's a little bit of both. I really do. I think that Notre Dame's going to pull in that public money, like the Lakers when they're good or the Yankees when they're good. They're going to pull in that public money because it is Notre Dame and they just have that storied franchise. But I also think that there's obviously some great bettors out there and there's some sharps. And those are the people that have actually taken a long, hard look at Notre Dame's schedule. Notre Dame has some pretty good wins if you've watched a lot of college football. They beat a good Louisville team. They beat a good Georgia Tech team. They beat a good Texas A&M team. Obviously Indiana, Penn State, throughout this college football playoff. But they have beaten a lot of just good football teams, the military academies. I know that you don't like the military academies, but they have beaten some good teams throughout the year. And I think that people that have watched a lot of college football have noticed, when you beat a Texas A&M who beat LSU, who beat some other pretty good teams during the season, and then Notre Dame goes in and beats them. Louisville beat Clemson. Notre Dame goes and beats Louisville. So I think it's a little bit of both. There's public money, and then there's that money of people that have actually taken a long, hard look at really what Notre Dame has done.
Okay. This is the point of the program where I want to point out that we have Nolan Patrick with Strike Point Sports joining us here. Probably the hottest football handicapper on the planet. He's 9-1 in his last 10 plays for like plus 4,500. I think it's 12-2 over the last 5 weeks, like 5 straight winning weeks. Hot as anyone. Seeing the board really well. However, this is the first instance where you were just flagrantly, blatantly wrong. Okay. Notre Dame has not played anyone this year. They have not played a good schedule. The ACC was a joke, and so much of their schedule was made up with like the bad ACC teams and the bad Big Ten teams. They even have had the easiest path of the 2 teams still remaining in these playoffs. Like, say what you want about Indiana. That game was at home. We saw what the home teams did. They're facing an overrated and overranked Georgia team with its backup quarterback. And then Penn State was, I mean, the third best team in the Big Ten. You compare that to what Ohio State has done. Absolutely. Like, they have beaten 3 teams in the playoffs that are arguably better than Notre Dame, and they have thrashed them. Like, those games really have not been close. So I just don't know that I see Notre Dame hanging around in this one. Like, what is it about how they play, what you've seen from them, that makes you think that this is going to be a competitive game and not just another championship game blowout, which frankly has been kind of the norm over the last 25 years?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are going to actually liken this game to the Michigan-Washington game of last year, where people thought that Washington was going to hang around with a Michigan team that was just playing better. I think I actually remember that line was about 5.5, 6, 4.5, 5.5, something like that last year. Michigan ended up blowing them out, and it was never close from the beginning. But I believe that Notre Dame actually has a top 15 strength of schedule, so I think it's a little bit better than you think. And don't even get me started on, you said that Ohio State beat teams that are better than Notre Dame. There's no chance that Texas is better than Notre Dame. Texas shouldn't have beaten Arizona State. But I just think that both of these teams are really good on both sides of the football. If you look at them statistically, obviously Ohio State, I believe, has the number 1 ranked defense in college football statistically. And I believe that they're top 6 or 7 offensively, but Notre Dame is not that far behind. So I mean, I wouldn't go big on this game, but I would be leaning the points. I think that there is a chance that Notre Dame is going to cover this line. I just think it's too many points. I didn't really like what I saw from Ohio State in that Texas game, because I am not a fan of Texas. I loved Arizona State. I think that Arizona State should have beaten Texas. They had better stats across the board offensively than Texas did. That was their game. And I don't even think Texas should have been there. And then you look at it, and if Texas would have just run the football straight up the gut 4 straight times, heck, bring in Arch Manning to do it, that's a tie football game, probably going into overtime. So I don't know. I think it's too many points. I lean Notre Dame. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I can also make the similar argument that Notre Dame was a little bit fortunate to escape Penn State. That game could have gone either way in the fourth quarter. And Ohio State, when they played Penn State, they kind of little brothered them when they played them in the regular season. But okay, what do you make of the fact that favorites in the college football playoffs in the first year of it, they're 9-1 straight up, 8-2 against the spread? The books have been getting punished here on these games. What do you make of that, just generally speaking?
Well, I think the first round, obviously, these teams playing at home, I mean, they just destroyed those teams. It wasn't close. None of them were close. Absolute blowouts. Then I think you take a look at some of the other, teams like Oregon, number 1 in the country, Ohio State, yet favored, and wins that game easily. I really think that there weren't those dominant teams. So when you just get a favorite, they were just playing better. And the underdog, there wasn't a ton of value on any underdog. So I think obviously playing at home was just a huge factor, and they covered easily in those huge matchups early on in the college football playoff. And then I think that you just had some overrated teams where Vegas knew, some of these teams that are underdogs just really aren't as good as people thought. And the favorites were just playing better.
I think I mentioned this last week, but if I didn't, I'm going to mention it again. I know the college football playoff selection, big fans of this show, big fans of What Are the Odds. I know that they're all watching live right now, but I think that obviously this is the first year of the playoffs. There's going to be tweaks. There's going to be changes. They're going to kind of manipulate the system. I think that the most obvious change that needs to happen for next year is that those first 4 games of the bottom 8 teams, those need to be regular bowl games played on neutral sites.
Yeah.
And those 4 teams that earn the bye, those should be the 4 home teams. Like, having a bye is not the advantage that people think it is. Like, these guys didn't play for a month. So it was a huge advantage for those teams that played that opening weekend. They got to knock the rust off. They got to get the nerves out. They got to build a little bit of momentum. And then they get to go face on neutral fields teams that hadn't played anybody in a month. So I think that that's a way to kind of tip the scales back to balance and really benefit those teams that earn those top 4 spots if they're really the 4 best teams, reward them with home games so that they will be favored to move on to the semifinals, because that's what you want out of a playoff system, right? If you're setting up a bracket, you're doing it with the idea that there'll probably be some upsets, but you want to give the best 4 teams the best chance to advance and really settle this. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, especially in college football, you're giving 18, 19-year-old kids a month off from what they've been doing. They've been in a routine. Yeah. When you're a pro, you can go about this a little bit better. But when you're an 18, 19-year-old kid, what are you doing when you have a month off? You are not going to be in tip-top shape, so to speak. So,
you know what I was doing at 18.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to imagine that they're doing the exact same things. But you mentioned professionals. We are going to change gears now. We're going to talk about the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. Huge weekend. We got some big numbers, got some mildly confusing numbers, but we have 4 great games. Okay. Before we get into that, I want to mention a stat that I came across this week while I was doing my stuff. And this allows me to make a very good point to the people that are watching and listening. The outright winner in divisional games has gone 38-12 against the spread. Okay. Over the last 50 divisional games, that's over a decade. The winner of the game covers the spread almost 80% of the time. Now that's a little bit less than regular season. This year, I believe outright winners cover the spread about 86% of the time. The 20-year average is right around 80%. But I guess my point is this, all right? And this is what listeners need to know and understand about betting. This week, you should not be betting on underdogs if you like them to keep it close. If you think Washington can keep it close at Detroit, you shouldn't be betting on Washington. You need to bet on teams that you think have a realistic chance of winning the game, okay? Don't just play the numbers. Don't just take him because there are a lot of points. If you don't think that Houston has a realistic chance of going into Kansas City, and that's the first game that we're going to talk about, you shouldn't be taking the points. Whoever you think is going to win, that is where you should be putting your money, because, again, over the last 12, 13 years, the teams that win the game cover about 80% of the time. So, Nolan, Kansas City, Houston, first game, 4:30 on Saturday. Chiefs taking all the action on this game as we kind of expected. 70% of the tickets, 82% of the money, everybody's on the Chiefs. It opened at 7.5. It's now up to 8.5. 2 questions. First of all, did that number come in around where you expected it? And do you see this number continuing to climb as we get closer to kickoff?
Yes, it did. It did come in about where I expected it to be. Kansas City on a bye. They needed time to get Patrick Mahomes healthy, blah, 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 blah. Andy Reid off a bye. Yada, yada, yada. So, and Houston, I mean, let's be honest, at the beginning of the season, they had Super Bowl aspirations. They were the hot team that people expected, and they didn't play very well. CJ Stroud didn't look good. The team as a whole didn't look good. They did deal with some injuries. Nico Collins missed, 4 or 5 games in the middle of the year. Houston didn't look as good as they should have. Yes, they beat the Chargers. I didn't like the Chargers. I was all over Houston in that game. But I think that the line came in right about where I figured it would be. Kansas City they just win somehow. Do I think it's going to continue to climb? Yes, I do. Because I think at this point, Kansas City is a pretty public team in the NFL. They've had some monster lines all year long. They've been double-digit favorites a lot throughout this season, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it continue to climb. I do not think it's going to get all the way up to 10, but I think that you're going to sniff, 9, maybe even 9.5 before kickoff.
Yeah, you answered my next question. I was going to ask you if you thought it got to 10, and I was going to ask you at what point do you think that the value is so overwhelming on Houston that they would be worth a little nibble? Like, what would this number have to be for you to take the Texans?
I mean, I think if it gets to 9, it is 9 at a lot of books now, 9.5, 10, I would be on Houston there. I really would. I'm interested to see how Patrick Mahomes looks. I mean, he hasn't, not had a meaningful snap since Christmas, so still one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time already in his career. But for the Chiefs to have the record that they do, they have not looked like that type of football team. Defensively, they've looked outstanding. Offensively, I haven't really liked them this season. I haven't liked what they brought to the table. I feel like they've gotten a little bit too methodical. 10 points is a lot. To cover 10, that defense is going to have to be absolutely dominant, and they're going to have to make sure that they don't turn the ball over against Houston. And this is probably the most confident Houston's been all season long. They got to the playoffs. They just won a playoff game easily in front of their home crowd. They're going to be about as motivated as they possibly could be. So if it got to 10, 9.5, 10, I would be on Houston.
Okay. Spoiler alert, I am on Kansas City. I do like the Chiefs this weekend. And I can tell you, Nolan, exactly how Patrick Mahomes is going to look. He's going to look awesome. 15-3 straight up, 13-5 against the spread in the playoffs for his career. The guy's a machine. Now, you said a lot of things that I want to unpack. We'll start with Houston, okay? And this is a little preview. Store this in your mind out there, bettors. And Eric Rosas came in and said, good luck to anyone who wagers this weekend. Thank you very much, Eric, for joining the show and for chiming in. So, Eric, this one is for you. Store this bit of information. Houston this year is going to be the Washington Commanders next year, okay? Houston underperformed compared to expectations, right? The thing that people forget is that last year they were the worst, or 2 years ago, they were the worst team in the league. So this year they got to face the easiest schedule in the NFL. They play in the worst division in the NFL. All right. Expectations went further past what their actual capabilities were this year. And that's exactly what we're going to see with Washington, a team that we're going to talk about next. They superseded all of these expectations going into next season. People are going to be talking about Jaden Daniels. They are talking about him right now, the same way they were talking about CJ Stroud last year, right? So all these expectations are going to be foisted on Washington in the offseason. That season win total number is going to bump up, but they're going to hit they're going to run into a wall the same way that Houston did. Injuries are going to happen. That more difficult schedule is going to happen. There are just going to be some issues that crop up that, make them a disappointing or underachieving team. Now, Noah, before I get into some more stuff about Kansas City, I want to ask you something straight up. These two teams played on December 21st. They played not that long ago. Yes. 27-19 win for Kansas City in Arrowhead. What do you make of that? Is that an advantage to Houston? Is it an advantage to Kansas City? Do you throw it out the window because it's a regular season meeting? That's one of 3 of the 4 games this weekend are rematches from regular season games. So how do you factor that into your handicapping?
Yeah, I took a long, hard look at that game. I actually went back and watched some of the highlights of that game. I believe CJ Stroud had 2 interceptions in that game, but oddly enough, Houston outpossessed Kansas City. They had more time of possession in that football game. A lot of the stats were similar. I actually think both teams, I could be wrong here, so if anybody wants to look, but I actually think both teams were maybe 7 of 13 on third down conversions. It's funny.
Oh, yeah, I remember that right off the top of my head.
Yeah, I gotcha. I looked at a lot of those things, and a lot of the comments a lot of the stats were very, very similar. But Houston had those 2 big turnovers, and to go and play in Arrowhead and lose by 8, like you said, 27-19. And now this line is a little bit higher than that. I do think that is a red flag. I think that people, like you said, know just how good Patrick Mahomes is in the playoffs. And I know that a lot of people have been waiting for him to get that extra rest to be ready. But if you look at that game and you don't think that CJ Stroud is going to turn the ball over a couple of times like he did there, if you're on that side of the coin, then maybe you are leaning Houston, because I think he had 2 touchdowns and 2 picks in that game. Okay. If he doesn't do that.
So here's where I'm going to push back a little bit, not just against you, but against the common narrative about the Chiefs, because I get it. They played a lot of close games. They won a lot of close games this year. They're laying over a touchdown. It's like, how can I trust this team to cover this big number when all they've done is play games that have come down to the last 30 seconds this regular season? Okay, here's my thing with Kansas City. 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. Mm-hmm. Okay, they are going for history for 3 straight this year. They understand that is how they will be judged, how this era, this team will be judged is by how they perform in the playoffs. So they actually played better and harder during the regular season than I was expecting. You see this a lot with a lot of teams in professional sports. They win a championship, they come back the next year, the regular season just doesn't mean as much.
Right.
Like, it's just a lot harder to get up for a game against Denver or Carolina or Houston when you're like, okay, we know we're good, we know we're going to the playoffs. Like, let's just get to the playoffs. Let's save our best punches for that. So I think that's why Kansas City has played up and down to its level of competition this year. They still won 15 games, right? Like, you look at Baltimore, they lost 5 games. Like, that very easily could have been Kansas City. So they have been in regular season mode all year. Now they have had 2 weeks to get into playoff mode. The Chiefs are 6-0 straight up and against the spread the last 2 years in the playoffs. Okay, won 2 straight Super Bowls. They've covered the number every single time. For me, this number would have to be in the double digits, closer to 2 touchdowns, to make me want to bet against the Chiefs in Arrowhead, because we've seen this movie before from them. We've seen what they come out and do and how they execute and their level of focus that they bring into the playoffs. So I don't know. I think Houston's running into a little bit of a buzzsaw here. So, okay, next game, really exciting game. Monster total in this game. Detroit hosting Washington in the 8 o'clock game. They're saving the fireworks for late at night. 69% of the tickets have been written for the favorite Detroit. Only 60% of the money is coming in on the Lions. This line opened at 10.5 and has come down. So we got a reverse line movement with a majority of the action going on the Lions, and the line is coming down. A little bit of a red flag that the bigger bets are going on Washington. So same thing, Nolan. Where did this number come in relative to where you were expecting it? That's number one. Number two, what do you think about that reverse line movement? And number three, are you surprised that only 60% of the money is coming in on the Lions?
Well, one, I think the line came in around where I thought. I thought it might even be a little bit higher because Detroit.
Then 10.5? Then 10.5? Okay.
Detroit's average margin of victory at home this season, I believe, is 13.4 points. You know, and they're that good. They're hoping to welcome back David Montgomery, which would be huge for that team. You know, that he's going to be a little bit healthier because you got to have Sonic and Knuckles in the playoffs. So I thought maybe a little half, maybe even a point higher than it did. The reverse line movement is a huge red flag, huge, because that's something that I like to focus on. I like to focus on that. If a line is going in one direction, but the money is going in the other direction, someone somewhere knows something. And so that is always a big red flag for me. So that is worrisome. And the fact that only 60% of the money coming in on the Lions is very interesting. But I think that's because it's almost that, what have you done for me lately kind of feeling. Washington just played. Everybody just watched Washington go on the road, win a game, win it in dramatic fashion, and the Lions didn't play. And so, but did we forget what the Lions just did to the Vikings in the last game of the regular season? Are we forgetting just what they've done all year long, just absolutely destroying teams at Ford Field? I think that they have 2 or 3 victories by 5 touchdowns on their home field. So I think that the line is, or the money is coming in a little bit, not as much. I think it's because of what have you done for me lately, because people are just focusing on what Washington did last week and the fact that they've done it so much throughout this season. But yeesh, I don't know if I could go against the Lions at home.
Yeah, a 1.5 point line movement in a playoff game. That's not a small movement. That's a big movement to come from 10.5 down to 9. And at DraftKings today, I saw 8.5.
Yeah.
So do you think this number is going to continue to come down, or do you think it's kind of found its level?
I think it's kind of found its level. I'm actually looking right now on a site that I like to use to get a lot of my different lines. And there is an 8.5 out there. Lot of my 9.5s. There are still a few 10s. So that line is odd. Some books have it at 10, some books have it at 8.5. I think it's leveled out. I wouldn't be surprised to see it level out at about 9 when the game kicks off, 9.5. I don't think you're going to see 8.5 after the next couple of days, after tomorrow. When you get to Saturday, I think you're looking at 9.5, because I do feel that sharp money is going to come in on the Lions.
Okay, I want to go back to something that you talked about, because it's actually a very important little lesson here for the people that are watching, about understanding the mechanisms of gambling. Okay, so on my insiders page at DocSports.com, it says right on there, gambling isn't magic, it's mathematics, right? It's all about the numbers when it comes to betting. That's only partially true. There's a psychology to this. And what you were talking about, the fact that Detroit has been off for 2 weeks and that Washington played well, played in the most exciting and best game of the weekend, pulled the upset. It's called the availability heuristic, okay? It's actually a very basic psychological principle that says that humans make decisions giving more weight to recent events than the totality of things that happen. So our brains are already wired to put more weight on something we just saw happen than taking that long view. So that I feel like that's why more people are jumping on that Washington bandwagon this week compared to what Detroit has done in totality this season. They're 14-2 straight up and 12-4 against the spread as a favorite. What they have done against the spread over the last 3 years, like, I can't remember anything like it. Like, some of those New England teams during the dynasty of the Brady era were just pumping out against the spread winners every week, cashing tickets all over the place. But the Lions have been by far the best bet in sports over the last 3 years.
For
so
sure.
I feel like people are undervaluing that a little bit. And this is the point where I ask you, how much do you factor in those types of long-term trends into your handicapping versus just looking at these situations as individual events?
I'm actually a really big long-term trend kind of guy, or somebody that really buys into teams that have sustained success, even if it's a 5-6 week period throughout a season. If a team gets to a point where they're winning and covering, I'm going to go with that team. One of my favorite things, anybody that's gone with Strike Point Sports over the last 3 years knows that after about week 3 or 4, you are going to see the Cincinnati Bengals on my card almost every weekend. I had a 4-week stretch throughout this season because, again, this is something that I have done probably over a three-year time period. So this isn't just something random. I've done it for 3 years, but over just this season with the Bengals, I had a 4-week stretch where I hit a 6 unit, a 7 unit, an 8 unit, and a 7 unit on the Bengals. Right. And it's the same thing that I would do with the Lions. It's when a team covers 12 of 16 games, why would you not take that team? They've proven that they're just going to win. Perfect example of what you said with the Tom Brady Patriots. Bet them every week. Bet them every single week because they're going to win and cover 70% of the time. And the Lions have done that. The Lions have done that sort of thing. So it's not just throwing a dart at a dartboard. It's throwing a dart at a dartboard where the bullseye is this big because the team just wins and wins and wins.
Okay, so you like trends. I got some trends for you. I'm going to throw out 4 numbers, and I want you to tell me which one of these you think is the most impactful, okay, or the one that you would give most credence to in wagering this weekend. All right, since 2009, home teams in the divisional round are 43-17 straight up, but just 30-30 against the spread. So home teams covering 50% of the times. Okay, in Saturday of the divisional round, home teams are 25-5 straight up, but they're 20-10 against the spread. On Saturdays, the home teams somehow win more and cover the spread more. Third big trend, rookie quarterbacks in the playoffs are 5-16 straight up in their last 21 games on the road.
Yep.
And then finally, the number 1 seed in the NFC, the top team in the NFC over the last 12 years, has gone 10-2 straight up and against the spread in their last 12 games. And they have only allowed an average of 13.3 points per game. So which one of those long-term spreads do you like the best?
The number 1 seed in the NFC, I really like. And that Saturday one is very interesting because that kind of goes against something that that I like to focus on, because if the team is covering on Saturday of the divisional round, that means they're coming off a bye, and I don't really like the whole bye thing. But one thing that I'm going to focus on, and it probably going to be a bet that I actually make this weekend. It wasn't on my card, but I'm going to do it, is that thing that you said about the team that only gives up 17 points. Say that again. The home team that gives up that number.
The number one seeds in the NFC have only allowed an average of 13.3 points per game over. Actually, that's the last 8 years, not the last 12, but the last 8 years. The NFC's number one seed has only allowed about 2 touchdowns a game.
And a bet that I'm going to make is going to be the under in the Washington Detroit game.
I wanted to ask you about that, because that number is astronomically high, 56, right? Now, of course, I see a shootout developing. Who wouldn't see a shootout developing? Like, the Detroit can hang 40 on anybody. One of the reasons I like Detroit a little bit in this game is that I don't trust Washington's defense to be able to get enough stops. This game kind of reminds me, tell me if you're feeling this at all. Do you remember that Seattle-Detroit game on Monday Night Football earlier this year?
Yes.
Seattle kept coming. I think they scored 30 points in that game. They just kept coming, but Detroit just held them at arm's length because they couldn't stop them. I think that was the game that, like, Jared Goff didn't throw an incompletion or something like that. He completed like 25 straight passes or something stupid like that. Like, that's kind of what I see in this game. However, do we have to just bet the under just on basic, like, handicapping principle that, like, this number is astronomically high? Everyone and their sister expects a shootout. But, if they go 1 8 or 9 minute stretch in this game where nobody scores, then, what's that going to do to your total? Should we be betting this under just blindly?
31-24. 31-24 is not going to cover the total. And that would be a high scoring, scoring game.
7 touchdowns right there.
Yeah. If you've taken a look at turnover margin, Detroit and Washington are 2 of the best teams in football of not giving the football away. So these 2 teams do not give up short fields. They don't give the ball away a ton. I think Detroit has only lost 3 fumbles on the year. So there's not going to be a lot of short fields. There's not going to be a lot of opportunities where a defense has to grind out a 10-play series and then come right back onto the field again because of a turnover. So these teams are going to take care of the football. They're going to go on some drives. You've got a rookie quarterback going into Detroit where they just beat teams bad. I would actually take a long, hard look at the under on the Commanders team total. And as I said, I'm going to be on under in the game outright. I do not see it. I don't see it getting over 50, 51 points. So I think there's a ton of value right now.
All right. Just want to give a little shout out here to Light Night Core, who joined us on the chat and is watching live. Thank you very much for stopping in. You asked what to bet on right now. Unfortunately, my top college basketball play, it was a small play, only a 2-unit play, was on High Point. That game started at 7, but I'll give you 2 late night college basketball bets to wager on. The first is number 846 takes San Diego plus 12.5 over Washington State. I like this Washington State team a lot. However, they're on the road. This is a big number to cover on the road. They're coming off a game against Gonzaga where they got beat last Saturday, so they might have a little bit of a letdown. San Diego is not a very good team, but they've managed to hang around with some teams. They only lost to Gonzaga by 13, and they stayed within that number against Santa Clara, Grand Canyon, UC San Diego. Again, letdown for Washington State. San Diego at home. Big, fat, double-digit number in a midweek game. So I like San Diego in college basketball. And then throw a little teaser your way. Nebraska, tease that down to -4 against Rutgers. That's at 9 o'clock. And then take UC Riverside and tease that up to 10. So Nebraska, UC Riverside teaser, and San Diego plus 12.5. Hopefully those hit for you. So, okay, shifting gears now to the Sunday games. Rams, Philadelphia. Another rematch game. All right. Philadelphia won 37-20 against the Rams in November. They ran the ball down the Rams' goddamn throat. They ran for 314 yards in that game. We'll get to that revenge angle and that matchup in a second. But I got to tell you, the line opened at 5. You talk about keying in on the way these numbers move. Opened at 5. It's been bet up to 6. Another situation where the majority of the action is coming in on the favorite, coming in on the home team. About 2/3 of the bets in this game are coming in on the Eagles. What do you make of this being a rematch? And what do you make of the fact that the Eagles ran for over 300 yards in that first meeting? We're going to talk about this a little more in that Baltimore-Buffalo match because it was similar in their game. Like, isn't that just one of those things that if you can't stop the run, you can't stop the run? Like, there's not really a way to scheme around that. Like, if the other team is just bigger, stronger, more physical than you, like, how do you square that circle?
Yeah, I to be honest, I think that this is a completely different Rams team than you saw in that Eagles game the first time they played. It was something wild. Didn't Saquon run for 250 plus yards, and he had almost 10 yards to carry? Yeah, I mean, just absolutely wild. The Rams, though, if you've taken a look at what they've done since that game, I think they've only lost one game since that time. I feel like they have looked like a completely different team. The defense has shored themselves up a little bit. I think that they've gotten a lot healthier. I like the Rams coaching staff. So I do agree that I think that they're going to do a really good job of kind of changing some things, tweaking some things. I think that you're going to see that pass rush get to Hurts and make him make a few mistakes in this game. So I do not see, to answer your question, I do not see Philly running like that again on the Rams because I like the Rams coaching staff a lot. I like Sean McVay. I like what he brings to the table. I do not think that Philly is going to be as successful doing that because I think that this is a completely different Rams team.
Okay, completely different Rams team, I will give you. However, at what point do we start talking about the Eagles being a little bit underrated and a little bit undervalued? And I'm going to explain why. When people are talking about the Super Bowl heavyweights, Super Bowl contenders, the most realistic teams, they're talking Chiefs, Bills, Ravens, whoever survives that game. They're talking Detroit. And then they just maybe somebody will just kind of throw the Eagles in there. But this team has won 13 out of its last 14 games. Mm-hmm. You look at 2 years ago, they were in the Super Bowl. Last year, they got off to that 10-1 start. This year, they've won 13 out of 14 games. So we're talking over a 3-year period where this Eagles team has been one of the 2 or 3 best teams in football. Hands down, no doubt about it. This core group is still together. They've won 8 straight home games. The last time they lost at home was in week 2. They're 8-2 against the spread at home. At what point do we have to, sit up and kind of take notice with the Eagles and be like, you know what, maybe they're the best team in the NFL. Maybe they're the most talented team in the NFL. Maybe that's not as big a stretch as it seems. What are your thoughts on that?
I would have to say, I've watched a lot of Eagles football, unfortunately, this season being an NFC
loser Giants fan. He's a loser Giants fan.
Being an NFC East fan. But let's just focus on last week's game. Let's just focus on the game that the Eagles just played against the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles were outgained in that football game. Time of possession was almost equal. I think at one point, my phone rang because Green Bay called to see if I wanted to come play wide receiver. And
the injury.
The Eagles, there was a chance if Green Bay doesn't turn the ball over late, Green Bay was going to cover that line in a game where they had nobody healthy. They turned the ball over. I think Love had 3 interceptions.
Yep. And
I know they got stopped on 4th down once, maybe twice. So you could say they had at least 4 turnovers, maybe 5 turnovers. They outgained the Eagles. Time of possession was the same. And if they wouldn't have turned it over on that last late possession, obviously the Eagles got it later when Saquon slid down to end the game. Green Bay could have covered with no one. So now I'm not buying Philadelphia as much. I really am not. I would say I also have no problem saying I'm wrong if Philly beats the Rams 31-14 this weekend. I would say I'm just flat wrong. I just think that the Rams are going to put up a better fight than Green Bay did in a game where Green Bay almost still covered when they played awful with no one. So I don't know. I'm just a little suspect on the Eagles. I don't like the drama that surrounds Philadelphia. You know, I mean, they're
Yeah.
star wide receivers reading a #1 bestseller on the bench in the middle
Hey,
of the
I like
game.
that. Feed your brain, man. Feed your brain, man. Come on.
There's just something about, I mean, the team doesn't like the coaching staff. The fans don't like the coaching staff. I just feel that there is a negative vibe that surrounds the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if they won the Super Bowl, I wouldn't say I'm dumbfounded because they are a good team, but something stinks. Something stinks.
Okay. I said it a couple of weeks ago and I stuck with it. I said that, I didn't release a play on that Minnesota-Detroit Week 18, that monster game, right?
I remember.
But I said beforehand, whoever loses that game, I'm betting against them next week.
Yep.
I'll say this about Philadelphia right here, right now on this live show. If they do win and cover this game, if they do blast the Rams, I'm taking them in Detroit in the NFC Championship game. They'll be underdogs. I think this is the game where if they do, because I agree with you. I like the Rams. I like the Rams a lot. Okay, this team has been hot. They're 10-2 in their last 12 games, something like that. I will admit, though, a little bit of a red flag. The Rams are the only team left. You mentioned Philadelphia getting outgained last week. The Rams are actually the only team left in the playoffs that have a negative yardage differential on the season. They're minus 22. But again, you attribute that to they had some injuries. They've had issues all season. This is a different team now than it was. But if the Eagles do win, then I think I'm going to be looking at them. I think I am going to take them against Detroit. Okay, I got 2 stats for you. And again, this is one of those Rorschach blotch things. I don't know if I said that, but I'm going to stick with it.
Yep.
Where you can see what you want to see, right? But I got 2 really good long-term divisional round trends, and you can kind of pick which one you like depending on who you like in this game. Divisional round underdogs that are seeking revenge, okay? So that's Houston, that's Buffalo, and that is the Rams. Divisional round underdogs seeking revenge for a regular season loss, 17-7 against the spread. That rematch game has gone the way of the underdogs more times than it hasn't. However, home underdogs in the wild card round that won. So home underdogs in the wild card round that were able to pull the upset are 2-15 against the spread in the divisional round. Which one of those stats do you like more?
Well, it's easy. The Rams weren't a home underdog. They played in Arizona.
That's fair. Okay. Well, how does that factor into your handicapping at all? Like what Los Angeles has been through, really?
Yep.
Without going too far into the weeds about the fire or whatever, but like it's been an emotional 2 weeks.
Yep.
It was a really emotional game and really emotional win for them on Monday in Arizona. Now they got to fly cross country. It's going to be cold as hell. They're facing a tough team. Like at what point do you think that they're going to be capable of riding that emotional momentum? We've seen teams do this in sports before, right? They rally around a cause, they rally around something emotional, and they go. Or at what point do you think that, the dam breaks, it's just too much, and they just run out of steam?
Right. I like what the Rams bring to the table as far as their skill players. I'm a huge Matt Stafford guy. I like Matt Stafford. I always have. One of my favorite videos, and I swear it pops up once every couple months. Stafford was playing for the Lions. He was good. They were trying to win a game, and he got crushed in the backfield, and his shoulder popped out. He had to go out of the game. Coach calls a timeout, so it allows Stafford to come back into the game. He can barely throw. He can barely lift his shoulder, and he ends up throwing a touchdown to win the game. And everybody's celebrating, and he's running off the field because his shoulder's not even in a socket. The guy is gutsy, and I like him. I like him over Jalen Hurts. I don't feel like Jalen Hurts is gutsy. I like Puka Nacua, and I like Cooper Kupp. I think that they're gutsy. I don't think Antonio Brown AJ Brown is gutsy. I like Saquon Barkley. I hate Saquon Barkley because he left the Giants. Obviously, he's really good. But, the Rams can run the football with Kyron Williams. I like Higbee, the tight end. I know that he got dinged up and left the game last game. The Rams defense just looks awesome. They've got just dogs getting all over the place. So I don't think that they're going to run out of that feeling, that momentum. I said it before. I like the Rams coaching staff. I think if you watch them play, those guys play for their coaches. Their coaches are always fired up, excited, smiling. The guys are smiling together. There's something about this Eagles team that stinks, and I like what the Rams are bringing to the table.
I think the most important question to get answered on maybe this entire show is, how does that video of Stafford pop up in your feed with like all the porn in your algorithm?
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, like all of a sudden that Stafford video just kind of pops in there. Like we're going to have to deep dive that probably on another show. And another show is Matt Stafford proving what I always say about NFL quarterbacks, in that like what situation you end up in is almost more important than your talent level. Imagine if that guy hadn't spent the first 10 years or whatever it was in Detroit.
Right.
You know? Imagine if that guy had spent his career in like a real organization. What would his career do? So, okay, moving on. Last game, best game, Noel. Baltimore at Buffalo. Again, really interesting with this number. Probably the most interesting number on the board this entire weekend. Buffalo opens as a token 1-point favorite when this line came out last week. Instantly goes the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Now the point that this team that's 9-0 at home with a lot of ass whoopings on their resume as well is now a home underdog in the divisional round of the playoffs. Okay. This is only the 5th time in the last 28 years that there has been a home underdog in the divisional round. Those road favorites, 1-3 straight up. And the majority of the action, slight majority, but majority of the action coming in on the Ravens. So before we break down this game schematically from a matchup perspective, just talk to me about the number, about where you thought it'd come in, where it came in, what you make of this home underdog situation, and just how you kind of handicap that out.
I thought that you were going to be looking at almost that token line that you see when you have two teams that are pretty equal, pretty, both very talented. I thought you would see the Bills -2, -2.5. Mm-hmm. I didn't think they'd be laying the full field goal. I thought it would be that line that you would see just under the field goal. So Vegas has people looking, if the Bills just kick that field goal at the end of the game, they're going to cover this spread. That's what I thought we would see. So it actually opened a little bit lower than I thought. Line movement's interesting. It really is.
I'm surprised that they're home.
Because really it just comes down to the Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen show on the surface. That's what everybody is looking at. They're looking at those two guys. They're not taking a look at anything else. Your public bettor is looking at Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. Who do I think is better? Regardless of where we're playing, who do I think is better? And, Lamar Jackson just announced as first team All-Pro. Lamar Jackson probably going to win the MVP. So now people are going, I think I like Lamar Jackson over Josh Allen. I think I agree with you, which doesn't happen often. I
jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah. I'm surprised that the line did what it did.
Okay, so once again, we have a revenge game. All right. Baltimore just housed Buffalo back in week 4, 35-10.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing like the Rams, Eagles. Baltimore ran the ball down their throat. Buffalo has been susceptible to teams that can run the ball. They play that bet. Sean McDermott still plays a lot of that cover 2, right? Bend but don't break. My question is this: they can bend all they want, and they can try and rely on getting those red zone stops. But if Baltimore can just ram the ball down their goddamn throat, aren't the Bills at a huge disadvantage here? Do you think that something has changed from week 4 to now with Buffalo's defense, whether it's personnel, schematics, whatever, where they're going to be able to bow their backs against that Baltimore running game?
I don't really think that things have changed for Buffalo. I mean, God, what week was it that the Bills gave up 40 points to the Rams? What was that final score? 44-42, something like that. Yeah,
even the game where they beat Detroit, they gave up 42 points to Detroit too. So, yeah.
No, and I think, you like I said, on the surface, you're looking at Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson, but the most important player on the field for either team is Derrick Henry. It's absolutely Derrick Henry. Those Bills fans are going to be just wild. You need to do everything you can to just get them out of the football game. And the easiest thing to do is just turn around and hand the ball to that butt beast and let him go. Let him just smash the Bills all day long. Go on these long just drives where you're beating up that defense. So, no, I don't think that the Bills defense has changed much. And if I'm Baltimore, I'm literally just handing the ball off to Derrick Henry until he says, stop giving it to me. I can't go anymore.
Okay, take this ride with me for a second. So you, like me, both grew up in upstate New York. You still live in upstate New York. So you're kind of plugged into just the general vibe around the Buffalo Bills and their fans and all this. You know how desperately this area just wants them to make it back to the Super Bowl, just wants that championship. At what point do you feel like playing at home in a game like this could actually almost be a detriment to them? Because if they fall behind in this game, it's almost like you can feel the defeatism, right? You can feel that negative vibe. You know, we talked about this, like we're breaking down the line movement in this game, the betting percentages, like all this stuff. That's the mathematical component of handicapping that you have to understand. That's not the only component. You got to understand the psychology and the psychological component. Like, do you buy that at all? That like, if they fall behind in this game and that crowd goes silent and that the weight of those expectations start to just creep in on Josh Allen, who maybe tries to do too much, or this Bills team in general, do you see that actually maybe working against them in this situation playing at home?
100% I do. There's no doubt about it. The people up here, you know, I'm in central New York. Obviously, the Bills are out in western New York, but even here, you know, I mean, I've got friends everywhere. There's somebody upstairs that's a diehard Bills fan. All they want, that franchise has just gone through so much. You are looking at a crowd that is going to be different than I think anywhere you've seen. You are Sunday night with 70%, 65% of the population having Monday off for Martin Luther King Day. It's going to be,
there will be death.
It's going to be unreal, the scene. And Josh Allen has done such a great job. This is going to sound weird. He's done such a great job this year of not being Josh Allen, turning the ball over at just ridiculous times. The year before this, you know, this past year, what do you have? 6 interceptions in the end zone, you know, and he just hasn't done that this year. And if he all of a sudden starts to feel that pressure and the crowd really needs him to do something, I feel like he's going to go back to the Josh Allen we've seen before and really try to force the issue, you know, and I think that would be a terrible thing. I really do. So yes, I agree. The pressure is going to be immense for this Buffalo team.
And you mentioned Derrick Henry as being really a focal point in this game. Let me take the opposite side of the coin. James Cook is going to be a critical player in this game. He's been really good this year. That offensive line has been really good. They've run the ball whenever they wanted. All the focus is on Derrick Henry, but if James Cook has one of those games where he can grind out 100, 110 yards, I haven't looked yet, but I'm interested to see what his prop numbers are going to be, because for me, that's the game. I look at both of these offenses and I'm like, how do you stop either one? How do you stop the Bills offense? They can run the ball. They don't have one guy that you can focus on in the passing game. They have 5 different guys that they can go to in the red zone or that can blow up for 6 or 7 catches. Josh Allen just does Josh Allen things. I don't know how anybody stops them with that offense. You can say the same thing about Baltimore. Lamar can run it. Henry can run it. They can just grind you out for 300 on the ground. Or they can throw the ball all over the place when you finally have to put that 9th man in the box to stop Henry. So when I look at these two teams, I feel like Baltimore's defense is more capable of getting those key stops than I do Buffalo is. I feel like if somebody's going to generate a game-changing turnover or get that 4th down stop, I just have a little bit more confidence in the Baltimore defense with the way it's played over the last month than the Buffalo defense. What do you think about that?
Yes, I agree with you. I agree that I do feel that Baltimore has the ability to make the big stop when they need to. The Bills defensively, I think that they just have a few too many holes, but this is the kind of game that I don't know if this is one of those games that we talked about at the very beginning of this show. Don't bet on it just because you want to bet on it. I just need to bet. I need to bet. This is the kind of game that you just watch and enjoy.
Absolutely.
I don't see a ton of value in this game. I really don't. Maybe attack the props like you see. This would be the kind of game that I would really like to take a look at props. But to answer your question, I do see Baltimore's defense just having a slight advantage making the stop when it calls for it.
All right, we have taken up an hour of Nolan Patrick from Strike Point Sports time. I think we're going to end it here. We're not going to let anybody else go away without getting a free play, though. So, Nolan, give the people what they want.
Under Lions, Commanders, and under Commanders team total. The Jalen Daniels experiment ends this season poorly.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go, being the wise handicapper that I am, I'm going to go against you in this one for my free play. And I actually kind of talked myself into it when I was, writing out my notes for the show and just talking it out with you. I kind of like Baltimore. The more I think about this game with the Bills, the more I kind of like the Ravens. The fact that they're favored on the road, a little bit of a red flag. There are just some mismatches that I don't think Buffalo is going to be able to compensate for. I don't think home field is going to be what Buffalo needs it to be in this game. It's going to be cold. It's going to be snowy. That's not going to bother the Ravens. They're going to be able to grind that out. And I just don't feel like this is Buffalo's year. Remember, this was kind of a rebuilding year, right? Like this was the first year they came into a season where they weren't on that Super Bowl short list of favorites. So I feel like they've kind of overachieved to this point. And I feel like they're set up really well for the next 4 years. I don't feel like their Super Bowl window is closed. But Baltimore, the more I see them play, the more I feel like this might be the year where they get to that summit. And if anybody's going to keep Kansas City from getting back to the Super Bowl, I think it's them. They were 11-0 this year against playoff teams in winning the yards per game. They outgained the 11 playoff teams that they played by 120 yards per game. They went 8-3 straight up in those games. I just think they're a better team. So, all right. Oh my God. And how fun is the winner, whoever wins that Ravens Bills game, going to Kansas City how unbelievable is that game going to be? All right. Thank you again for your time, Nolan. Stay hot with those football picks. Again, 5 straight winning weeks. To all of you out there, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week. Carpe diem and good luck.